Hey, Honors Chemistry. So I wanted to make another video on interpreting and actually constructing density graphs. And when I say density graphs, I mean density or mass versus volume graphs, okay? So before in my recent video, we had a plot of mass versus volume for silver. How did I know that? When I plotted this graph, I got this equation, which was 10.5x. And I should know now that this number in front of 10.5x is 10.5 is the slope, and the slope is equal to the density. So if I look at a table of known densities, silver was 10.5, and that must mean that this must be silver. Now, what if you are prompted to plot a graph just given a density? Let's say I'm going to add in, let's say I wanted to do something, and I'm just going to add in a weird one. Insert or above. Let's say I wanted you to do some sort of weird crude oil, and its density was 5.0. Okay, I wanted to have like a nice number. What if I asked you, and you will get this in your handout and in a future worksheet, to plot the graph of crude oil and its density is 5.0 grams per milliliter? Well, I'm not given anything else except for the density, but what I do know, and I'm going to add like a column, what I do know as like kind of like little notes for me is that the mass changes, the change in mass versus change in volume is 5, meaning 5 grams of oil for every 1 milliliter of oil. That is what is meant by the density. That is what 5 grams per milliliter is. So it's kind of like a little note for us here. Actually going to make this so you can see that. All right, change in mass versus change in volume is the slope. Okay, and that means that 5 grams of oil for every 1 milliliter of oil, that's the density. So every time I change 5 grams, I will change 1 milliliter. So I could do this again. If I have 10 grams, I must have 2 milliliters. If I have 50 grams, I must have, let's see, if 5 grams for every 1, 50 must mean 10 milliliters, and so on and so forth. And I don't know if you can see what I'm doing is I'm kind of making up data points now. So let's I'm going to copy and paste this, and this is how you do drawing. I'm going to show you how we could sketch a line for, I'm going to show you how we could sketch a line for this graph. So I know that this crude oil is 5 grams per milliliter, and on this graph right now I have silver, which is 10.5. So let me start kind of either making points or drawing a line. There is one data point that I know for sure, and I'm actually going to shade it in. There's one data point that I know for sure for actually all of these graphs, and that's 0, 0. So I'm going to kind of have that, and I'm going to make sure that that's shaded in dark, like that's black. All right, that's a data point that I know. Now, I might just want to figure out kind of working a little bit of math or going forward. If I have 20 through 100 here, if I had 100 milliliters, how many grams would that be? Well, just by showing a little bit of work here, my density, actually, let's do, if I have 500 grams, how many milliliters is that? So if I have 500 grams, for every 5 grams, there is 1 milliliter. If I had 500 grams, right, that's 100 times, I must have 100 milliliters. And so I'm going to make that a point. For 500 grams, I should probably have 100 milliliters. And that's a point that I know. And this is how you're going to be making kind of your graph from just the density, is I'm making up or I'm adding points that I know. If I want, I could do another point in the middle. Let's say I had 250 grams. If I had 250 grams, which is half as much, right? If I had 250 grams, I should probably have 50 milliliters. That's probably going to be another point that I know. And the math that I'm doing is For every 5 grams, I have 1 milliliter. So I divide by 5. 250 divided by 5 is 50. 500 divided by 5 is 100, right? I'm doing kind of like a ratio. I could also calculate this mathematically. As I showed you in another video, right? I could say y is equal to 5x, because technically the 5 is the slope. Oh, I have to make this box bigger. Technically, 5 is the slope, which is the density. So I kind of just plug that in. What I could do then is I could say my y-axis is grams is equal to 5 times milliliters. Okay? And so if I know, like I said over here, if I make up another number, if like I'm just going to use this 250, if I know I have 250 grams equals 5 times my milliliters. If I want to solve for milliliters, I probably want to divide both sides by 5, and that's where I get my 50. Okay? So I have another data point. I have 250 grams and 50 milliliters. I'm going to add that in as a data point. 250 grams and 50 milliliters right here. Let me make it up a little bit. Right there. All right. And guess what I'm going to do now with these 3 data points? If I want to kind of construct my line, I could just connect these data points. And I only did 3. 2 would have been suffice, right? But I did 3. I could have done 2. Why do I need at least 2 data points? Well, if I want to make a line consists of 2 points, right, that are connected. So I did 2, but I did a third one just in case. Now I'm going to connect these 3, all right? Kind of like trying to hit all 3 of them, but I can't. And there we go. That would be, that would be the graph of a line for this crude oil for the density line. And that equation would be y equals 5x. And then later on, you're going to have to interpret which of these is more or less dense. Well, oil is 5 grams per milliliter, whereas silver is 10.5 grams per milliliter. Mathematically, oil is less dense. But also, oil is lower in the graph here. The lower it is, the less dense it is. That means it has less mass per volume. That is what less dense means. And I'm going to make that as like a little text box right here. Less dense. Less dense. Less dense means less mass per volume. And the way we determine that is lower line on graph. If I somehow had a random line that was higher up, this would mean this would be a line for something that was more dense. Okay? So I'm hoping this video was kind of helpful in you constructing and interpreting density graphs again. I will post a third video by hand where we could kind of calculate the slope if I need to and constructing those graphs.